computer. Okay, everybody, we are recording it just so everybody knows. If anybody has any super secret questions that they don't want in the eyes of the digital universe, please let us know. I guess it's 2:30. We'll get started. Hopefully get more people coming in. I want to thank everybody for attending the NOC in general and to our webinar in particular. My name is Josh Bradley. I am a member of the National Committee, and I'm also running for City Council in Raleigh, North Carolina for an at-large seat. And we thought that it might be a decent idea to go over how we organize our campaign, since we are grassroots, obviously not getting the big developer bucks because we absolutely would not accept them. So what I thought I would do first is I'm going to introduce to the members of the campaign collective that are on the call and will be helping with the presentation. And I'm going to go with, my pronouns are he, him. So I'll go through everybody that's on not my collective, in our collective, and introduce them. We'll start with Haley.
Hey y'all, I'm Haley. I use he, they, and she pronouns. I'm the social media manager for our campaign.
Awesome. Wayne.
I'm Wayne Turner. I'm in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, member of Socialist Party USA and North Carolina Green Party.
Awesome. And our Brain Trust. And we have Emily.
Hey everyone, Emily, she, her. I am also on the National Committee and co-chair of our local here in Piedmont, North Carolina.
Well, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get this show on the proverbial road. Can everybody see this? Okay. Hey, everybody. Again, my name is Josh Bradley. I'm running for City Council in Raleigh, North Carolina, the first socialist that has run for a position in at least 100 years. I haven't really found another socialist that's run for it. I ran in 2019, managed to get 10% of the vote in the bougiest district in the city. I was outraised by 2 orders of magnitude, but we still managed to, but we raised under $1,000 and we were still able to get 10% of the vote. And I think and as a political unknown, which is a stretch too. And I figure that the way that we had organized the campaign last time was good. So I've continued it this time. And I think that organizing a campaign collective instead of a top down, you hire somebody to do your, to a campaign manager and handle all that. We're not going to raise enough money if we're living close to our values to be able to pay somebody what we would hopefully expect to pay them. And B, it's a collective effort. I mean, it's really important to do that. I just want to acknowledge at the start that I know that revolution is not going to be achieved by of the electoral business. The bourgeoisie is not going to hand power over to the proletariat in an election, but running in campaigns is a way to get your message out, and it gets a way to say that there are other options and there's a better way to organize society that does not leave a lot of people out. So I'll hit the next slide, and I think that's me as well. And the next slide, we're just going to go over and show how we've got this laid out. The table of contents for the slide, it is a PowerPoint that has a table of contents, so that means there's a lot of content coming. So And what we're gonna do is different members of the collective are gonna go over different parts, so you won't have to hear my rambling. Anyway, so the first section, we're gonna talk about what you gotta do, getting the infrastructure in place for running. Second is know when you're gonna do it, because it's really important. It's not something you wanna learn right as you file. 3 is organizing a collective, and it's building the collective and the importance of consensus on issues and consensus on planning and putting together a platform that is collectively organized and collectively run. We're stronger together than we are individually. And then we're going to do being involved as a candidate, and it's about being involved with your community and local organizers. And then we're going to talk about running third party or other party or nonpartisan or independently, and how to deal with the, as what Matt Ho says, the capitalist parties of war and exploitation. I don't know, but yeah, the bad guys. And then at the end, we'll have we'll be able to do questions and continuing discussion. So let's see who we have. Okay, I'm going in the wrong direction. Okay. First section is know what you gotta do. And I'm gonna hand it over to Emily.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm going to go through a lot of the technical requirements that we had to go through to actually file to run for office. Now, as I'm going through these, I'm going to lay out the specific steps that we had to take to file to run for municipal office in Raleigh, North Carolina. So depending on where you're running, what office you're running for, a lot of these are going to be different for you. They're going to vary by state and all of that. So just keep that in mind. But I did want to go through all of this like kind of line by line, because when we started our first campaign in 2019, this was a big learning curve for us. And it might be for you too as well, because, as socialists, we're not a fan of working inside the system. When we started in 2019, none of us had done anything electoral before in our lives. So there was a lot that we had to learn and struggle through, and hopefully what we present to you here today will help you a little bit with that. Okay, so figuring out what the filing requirements are in your state and for the position that you're running for. So you need to know when that filing period is going to be. Typically, a filing period is going to be about 2 weeks long. It's going to be maybe 3 or 4 months before your election. So you need to find out when that's going to be. Where do you have to go to file? And do I have to file in person? The answer to that is yes, because you have to give your signature and have it notarized. So you're going to need to file in person at either your state or county board of elections, depending on the office that you're running for. You need to know the basic qualifications for the office that you're running for. These might include you have to be a registered voter. You have to have your primary residency in the state or city where you're going to be running. There may be an age requirement. For us, you had to be 21 years old or older to run for city council in Raleigh. How much is filing going to be? That's going to depend on your office. Typically, it's going to be about 1% of the salary for that office. For us to file for city council, it costs $200. sorry, lost my place. You need to know what you need to bring to do your filing. You're going to have a valid ID. So when you're thinking about filing to run, you need to put your eyes on that ID, make sure that it's not going to be expired by your filing period. You have your correct address all on there. Make sure you're not going to run into any silly problems that are easily avoidable. You need to know what payment methods are accepted when you file for that candidacy. For our city, it had to be a check or a money order. Basically, this filing has got to be paid in cash. Okay, and so next you need to find out what the campaign finance laws and regulations are in your area. What do you have to do to set up a candidate committee in your state or area? And last, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to file your affiliation. Big hint, however you're allowed to register as a voter is going to be how you're going to be allowed to file as a candidate. So in North Carolina, you can be a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, and now once again a Green. That's gone back and forth. But so obviously we can't file to run as a socialist on the ballot in North Carolina. Wherever you live, that might be different. We're also running for city council, which is a nonpartisan race. So actually on the ballot, there is not going to be a candidate affiliation. All right, so if we can go to the next slide, please. So now that you've found out all the requirements for setting up a candidate committee in your state, because you did some reading and you found out you can't just be a candidate by yourself and, you know, throw up a link and say, hey, donate to my campaign. You've got to set up a candidate committee who's able to take those donations and process them. So there are a lot of complicated steps to setting up a candidate committee. The first thing that you're going to need to do is select and appoint a treasurer. This person who's going to be your treasurer, you want to pick someone who is going to be able to commit a lot of time and do a lot of work. There's a lot involved in being a treasurer. You've got to file quarterly reports. You've got to track all of the donations and spending for the campaign. You want to pick someone who is responsible, is trustworthy, doesn't mind doing paperwork, and is comfortable reading legal language. Because as you're going through all of these requirements, you're going to see that a lot of what you're going to read through is straight up state statutes and laws. So you're going to want someone who's comfortable with all of that. And if you pick someone for your treasurer who can read that legal language, they're going to be really helpful to you in other areas of the campaign as well, because there's a lot of times that you're going to have to read through state statutes and understand what's going on. Your treasurer in North Carolina, our treasurer has to go through a state board of elections training that's going to teach them about all of the reports they have to submit and all of the laws around that. And that treasurer is required to complete that training within a couple of months of being appointed as the treasurer. Now, I will say that you can, as the candidate, be your own treasurer. That is allowed. I don't recommend it because there's a lot that you're going to have to do as a candidate, and you really are not going to want to have to deal with financial reports and all of this stuff. In our opinion, it's better if you pick someone and delegate that responsibility. So once you've picked your treasurer, you want to establish your campaign committee. Now there are two forms that you have to file to do that. And the first one, for us at least, we had to file articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State. And that established our campaign committee. That cost $60, and we had to wait for them to get back to us. So you want to get this stuff done early. The next thing after filing your articles of incorporation, as a campaign, you're going to be accepting money, right? So you're going to have to deal with the IRS. So you go to the IRS, you file form SS4, and that's going to be requesting an employer identification number. Now you have to have this even if you're not going to have employees. And then once you get that EIN, you're going to get a second form. I think it's form 8817. And depending on what you're running for, there are going to be different requirements on that form. Basically, that form is financial disclosures. We are required to report that to our state board of elections. And therefore, we don't have to really do anything with form 8817 other than declare on that form that we don't have to do that part because we did it through the state. There's a box for that. So after you get that done, you want to open a bank account. You can't use your personal bank account. You want to keep that separate. You want an account that's dedicated to the campaign. So once you have that bank account, and once you have selected your treasurer is going to file simultaneously a statement of organization of the committee. That's different than the articles of incorporation. The second form I said earlier, there was two, this is the second one. So statement of organization, they're going to file a certification of treasurer. This is going to register them as the treasurer of your candidate committee. They're going to file a financial account disclosure. You're going to have to give your bank account numbers. This is why we already opened the bank account, so that we would have that ready for this financial account disclosure form. And then at this time, if you're going to file a certificate of threshold for fundraising, you would file that at this time as well. Certificate of threshold means that during your campaign, you do not intend to raise or spend more than a certain amount. For us, the threshold amount is $1,000. Now, for our first campaign, we filed that certificate of threshold. We thought, hey, we're just like flying by the seat of our pants here. We're probably not going to raise more than $1,000. We're going to go ahead and file that. And what we found was that, first of all, we had to go amend that later and remove that certificate of threshold because we actually went over that $1,000. The second thing that we found was that if you file that certificate of threshold, a lot of the institutions and organizations are not really going to take your candidacy seriously. And so for our second run, we did not use that certificate of threshold. We talked about it and decided that, hey, we're going to actively fundraise. Running a campaign is expensive. You're going to need money. And actually, the reason that we went over that threshold in the first campaign was due to an in-kind donation. So everything that you use as material support in your campaign has to be declared. It all counts toward that total fundraising amount. So that's something that you need to consider. So make sure I'm in the right place here. All right. Okay, and so you actually can wait until your actual filing date to set up your committee. what happens when you file, if you haven't set up a committee already, that filing is going to trigger the requirement for you to set up a committee. So rather than have to scramble and get that all together at once, we recommend that you already have all of this out of the way, have your committee established, and be ready before filing. The other reason to do that is that you cannot raise any money or spend any money until this committee is established and in place. So considering that your filing date is only going to be a few months out from your election, you already want to be fundraising, you already want to be spending, you already want to be doing the work. So getting this done early is something that we highly recommend. So next slide, please. All right, so now that you can legally start fundraising, you need to get ready to take donations. So again, you need to go back and review your rules for fundraising in an election. You need to know who can and cannot donate. Foreign nationals cannot donate. Corporations, businesses, labor unions, insurance companies cannot donate to your campaign. Certain nonprofits can donate to your campaign. People who hold a green card can donate to your campaign. You need to know what counts as a donation. Like I said earlier, there are non-cash materials that still count as donations. If somebody, say you have somebody who donates an event space in order for you to hold a meet and greet, but they don't charge you, hey, guess what? That's still an in-kind donation, and you're going to have to claim that in your financial reports according to how much that would normally cost, and that's going to count towards your total fundraising. Okay, so now that you're able to start fundraising, you need a way to actually take donations. So I am going to highly recommend using DonorBox or another fundraising software, because this takes out a lot of the paperwork and making sure that you're in compliance. They do a lot of this stuff for you. When they collect those donations, they're collecting all of the data that you need to report. So when you get donations, you have to report the donor's name, address, occupation, and you've also got to have a little statement on there that says, hey, we are required to collect your name, address, occupation, da da da. You have to put that actually on your donation page. Like, there's a specific statute about that. You can, with DonorBox or another fundraising software, you can set donation limits to stay in compliance. Your max donation limit is going to vary depending on where you are. For us, that was $5,600. It's never a thing that we've had to worry about. We've never gotten it more than $5,600 in donations from one donor. And it's important to know that max donation amount applies throughout the campaign. So if someone donates a total of $5,700 to our campaign, we've got to go refund them $100. It doesn't matter if they did that in 5 separate donations over the course of the campaign. That is the limit. So those are things that you need to know. Your fundraising software, your DonorBox or whatever, is also going to collect that donor data and payment info securely and pass it through to the payment processor. So you're not going to be able to see anybody's credit cards. You're not going to have to worry about, oh, is my, web page secure enough? Is anybody going to be able to steal my donor's information? There's a lot of protections there in place. And then DonorBox also has like easy embed codes and ways for you to put it on your social media blogs, whatever. So DonorBox collects the information and passes it on. They pass it on to a payment processor, in our case, Stripe. So we had to sign up for another account for Stripe. And what Stripe does is they take that credit card information, they process it, and they deposit that money into your account. So once you've got all that set up, you need to send a small donation, $5, whatever, follow it through, make sure it actually lands in your bank account before you go sharing that donation link all over the place. All right, so then then you need to know what other rules are going to apply. There are very, very specific requirements for what advertisements or materials have to have a paid for by the campaign to elect whoever to office. That text has to be a certain size. It has to take up a certain percentage area of the total printed area. So there are a lot of little rules and regulations that you're going to have to read through. There are specific regulations for soliciting, for ads and mailing, for political signs, when you can put them out, what size they can be, where they can be, what constitutes the public right of way. These are all things that you're going to need to know. So go to our next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about prioritizing your finances, because we're running a small volunteer-led grassroots campaign here. We're not going to have, $500,000 like some of our mayoral candidates have already surpassed. So you need to figure out what exactly you need. What high cost material support can you source from volunteers and donors instead of paying for? So things like getting your website built, making videos and ads and things for your campaign, looking for event space, that sort of thing. What can you get for free, honestly, because you can't afford to pay for everything. So figure out what you can get away with not paying for, and then figure out, okay, what do you need to pay for? There's going to be a lot of as soon as you file for candidacy, you're going to get a bunch of emails from people wanting to do your SEO for your website. They want you to pay for this. They want you to pay for that. They want you to pay for a database of call lists and things like that. Use free resources wherever you can get them. Public voter registration and voter history data is available. You can go download that data, filter it for what you need, and use that to target the voters that you want to focus on. You want to figure out your highest cost items. For us, those are going to be yard signs, mailers. We decided not to do because it's too much money. Even if we find a way to print really cheaply, we do it, on our own, and well, then we still have to mail them out, and postage is really high. I think we figured out it would cost us like $2,000 to send out 800 mailers. And that's just not feasible for us. So what we focus on in our campaign is the ground game, getting volunteers out, canvassing door to door, that sort of thing. So after you figure out what your budget's going to be, set your fundraising goals, and then start asking for donations, and don't feel shy about asking for donations. The bottom line is you're going to need money to run this campaign. And yes, we're running a working class campaign. We're talking to working class voters. No, we don't know a lot of people that can donate thousands of dollars. So you need to get a lot of $5 and $10 and $20 and $100. That's what you got to do. And you got to keep on asking for those donations and keep on asking for them. So where can you find out more about all this? Where can you find out all of the requirements for your particular run? If you go to this link down here, usa.gov/election-office, that's going to take you to a thing where you put in your state, and it will take you to your state board of elections. I put another link down there, candidate boot camp, that goes through a lot of these general requirements and things that you're going to need to know about running a campaign. And all right, so with that, I will pass it on to our next speaker.
Hey, Emily, before you go, or anybody who is on the collective, in the question and answer session, Ren has a question that says, does volunteering to drive people to and from events count as an in-kind donation or constitute an in-kind donation? In other words, would the campaign have to factor the cost of gas for transportation? I would say probably not, but I would say if it were just me, I might check, but I wouldn't necessarily think so unless it's an organized, unless it's a campaign, and unless you're using it to campaign, I would think. Emily, Haley?
Right, I don't think so. I would have to check into that specifically, and it's another one of those kind of things that might vary by where you are. But to my knowledge, that's not something that you have to claim. But say our canvassers are out, they're canvassing door to door, and they run out of staples, and they go to Walmart and they buy some staples, and they come back in, they're like, oh yeah, we ran out of staples, so we had to go just buy some, but I paid for it out of pocket, don't worry about it. That's an in-kind donation. So you need that receipt, and you're going to have to claim it. But I don't think that gas to shuffle people around is something that you have to claim, but I would definitely verify that. And something that's important to know is that your state board of elections is there to help you. So if you have questions like this and you read through all the stuff and you're like, well, I'm still not sure about this, ask your state board of elections. You can ask these questions at filing. You can call them anytime, and they'll be happy to help you, because that's what they're there for.
Yeah. And also asked, what if I already have a ton of staples? That's fine. I don't think they're gonna nickel and dime you.
Yeah, you can use existing things that you own, and that's not considered a donation.
Yeah, an example of that would be like, I have a button maker, but I have a button maker in general, so I make these little buttons that say "Unfuck Raleigh" that has nothing to do with the campaign. It's just I want to make a statement of my own. But if I were to buy like the actual button making materials and the printing cost for what I'm putting on the buttons, if it's related to the campaign, then I will have to submit that. So hopefully that's clarifying, Ren. If not, let us know. We can do it and we can research it. And as always, you know, we'll see, you know, always reach out to us. I mean, we're happy to help, you know, either by email or you can Facebook Messenger or text or whatever. And at the end, we'll have our contact information for the campaign as well. Anyway, thanks for that. And we'll go to the next slide. Can the other panelists see the chat box? Can somebody, I've been keeping an eye on Q&A. If somebody can keep an eye on the chat.
I'm looking at the chat. Some of these questions we're about to touch on later in the presentation, so we might want to answer them at the end.
Okay. Okay, I think the next part of the next bit is mine. Know when you got to do it. Planning ahead of election, filing and early voting to make sure you know how early to start setting up your collective and planning events. So this is the stuff that we came up with, you know, after the experience of the last campaign. And my, obviously, my opinion is that you need to start meeting early. You need to, you know, that enables your collective, and you need to start assembling your collective. And when I say assembling your collective, find people that are on your team. You can use friends, you can use members of your party, you can use people that you know from activism, you can use, you know, people that are willing to understand that chances are we're not going to raise enough money to pay anybody, but people that are interested in pushing the message that you as a candidate and being able to refine your message. It's important. And I think we go into, and I'm not going to talk too much on it because it's comes down the road, but like collectives are important. Anyway, but I would say that as soon as you get a hankering to run, as soon as you feel like that you need to run, or there's an issue that's coming up in your city, state, or, I mean, there's obviously, you know, stuff that's happening in the country all the time that's infuriating and wants to do. But as soon as you get that urge, you need to start working on it. You might not have to devote a ton of time to it initially, but that's when you start meeting, you start assembling your collective and start scheduling meetings, whether you're using Zoom or in person or however you want to do it. But that gets you able to get, you know, hit the ground running when it gets serious. I mean, you can come up with your logo, you can come up with your, you know, your campaign website, what you want it to look like. You want to, you know, figure out which donation you're going to use, you know, which collaborative tools you're going to use, get your social media pages ready to go. And then like as early as you can, if you meet once a month or once every 2 weeks, you know, gets everybody, you know, in touch and you know, make sure that everybody's still on board and that and you get a lot of that pre-work done ahead of time.
What's going on?
So
Couldn't tell what's going on. My hands were greasy and
okay.
limb.
I think
Okay.
somebody who's in the audience needs to go ahead and mute their mic.
Yeah, I took care of it. So and then I don't know how to go backward on a slide. Does anybody know? Hold on. There we go. Okay. And then, as I said, you want to have your infrastructure done, but before you officially file, because as soon as you file, you're going to start getting emails from people that are interested in screening you for endorsement. They're gonna be candidate forums that happen, and the earlier you can get file is the more you have a chance to do that. you're gonna start organizing how your volunteer outreach effort, and you want to have your campaign infrastructure, like who is going to primarily handle which aspects of the campaign before it starts. So you can have that out of the way. So as soon as you can get out into the community and focus on that kind of stuff. And it also gives you time to put together a platform and have your collective already discussing the platform early on, because once filing starts, it's on, and it's gonna be one of the busiest times that you have to, that could possibly be, especially if you work. And the last thing I'm going to talk about before I hand it over is you're really going to need to prioritize, right? There's certain things that you're going to need to do. At some point, you're going to need signs. You're going to need to get out and get in forums and endorsements and organizing, canvassing efforts. And they take time to coordinate. So you want to really get you want to get as much of at least the infrastructure to deal with that in place ahead of time, or else you're just going to be scrambling for the entire election period. So, I mean, it's really important to do what you can ahead of time. Like, you can pretty much meet and do everything that doesn't involve money before you file. It's just, or before you set up your committee. And you can set up your committee before you file. Like, if I'm not planning on running for 2 years and I want to set up a committee for the 2024 election cycle, then I can set up a committee. And after this election's over, win or lose, I can maintain the committee if I want to, if I'm planning on running again, as far as filing. But that's going to involve sending reports in off years. But so as much as you can front load, the better. It's just, you got to remember, you really can't start fundraising until you get a committee. You can raise funds before you actually file, as long as you have a committee, though. So the earlier you get your campaign committee set up, the earlier you can take in money. And when it comes to like in forums and endorsements, like, there's some of them that you might not bother. You don't want to devote a whole lot of time to people that oppose you, right? Like our campaign, if the cop union, well, I'm going to go to that because I think it's funny, but like the Home Builders Association, which is the Association of Developers, the Chamber of Commerce, if I get hey, we would like to see who you are and to see if you want to be endorsed, I'm going to send an email saying, thank you very much for your offer. We are not seeking your endorsement, nor could we take any contributions from your organization. Have a blessed day, or whatever. But anyway, so I am going to hand it off, I think. And I think organizing a campaign collective is next on the agenda. And I think that's still me. So
I'd do the first of the 2 slides and then you do the second one. We
Okay.
split this up.
This is yours, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
So this is basically talking about the infrastructure for the campaign. So building a campaign collective that is effective is going to require a lot of organization, awareness of how to get people to work together in real time. So when you are recruiting people to have them join your collective, you're going to want to reach out to the people that are in established networks that you're already a part of. So if you have a friend who's already really good at making flyers, go ahead and talk to them now and enlist their help for graphics for your campaign. If you know a photographer, you can go ahead and reach out and see if they would be somebody who would be able to regularly attend and photograph campaign events. Maybe you've got a coworker who's really organized and y'all are closely aligned politically. They might make for a really good campaign manager. Ideally, everybody in your collective could fill in these types of roles at any time. They'll know the basics of campaign finances, note taking. They'll know where your files are kept. They'll know which local events you want to attend. They'll know to take pictures and post that stuff to social media. But if you're going to play to everyone's strengths, it's good to know who in particular you can reach out for certain things that fit their skill set. And that's also a good way to make sure that the work for the campaign is evenly distributed so that no one is overworked. So for example, if you've got someone who is responsible with spreadsheets, good at math, and they're very organized and they've got a lot of time on their hands, they're going to make for a good campaign treasurer. Ideally, everybody on your campaign should know the basics of the finance requirements, but the treasurer position is specialized enough to make sure that that person in particular is using a skill that they have and are very strong at. So in my case, I'm the campaign social media manager. So my role is specialized in that I handle our graphics and our online communications and our social media pages. And I know what is suitable for each type of social media platform and so on. I also do a lot of like our document designs, things like that. And it makes sense for me to be in that role because I have a background in English and I've been trained in technical communication and rhetoric. So that skill set then applies very specifically to what I do for the campaign. And each campaign collective member is going to have skills like that that they can bring in, and you should make sure to distribute your workload to match each person's skill set. In addition to that, it's really important to have good organizing infrastructure. So this means making use of real-time collaboration tools and softwares like Google Workspace, which I'm sure a lot of you use, because there you can collaborate on PowerPoints and documents collectively. Zoom is another way that you can meet online. I did want to specifically mention Slack and Discord here because they're really effective for managing large volunteer teams. So in both Slack and Discord, you can have channels, which are basically like group chats, and you can have channels that are specific to, a specific topic or a task that the campaign needs to complete. So, for example, you could have a channel that is specifically meant for anybody that wants to fill out endorsement forms. They can meet there either by chat or voice call or what have you, and they can work together on that specific task. There are some differences between Slack and Discord, but they're both basically a good way to have message boards and create multiple group chat rooms in one shared space that the entire campaign can access as needed. There's other tools like Google Calendar and Airtable are really good for keeping tracks of events and tasks and projects so that you can assign them to users and then keep track of like your progress, when are things due. But the most important part of it is that everyone on the campaign should know what these tools do. They should know how to use them, and they should know where to find the information that they need. So using some sort of central structure, like a Google Drive that has folders for everything in it, like your meeting minutes, your endorsement forms, your social media toolkits, and all of that, have it in an accessible place so that every single member of the collective can access shared information and while they work on tasks as individuals. They should be able to go into your Google Drive and upload whatever they have been working on to share it with everybody else. And likewise, they should be able to pull information that they need for individual projects. I would caution against using too many tools though. Like it wouldn't make sense to have both a Slack and a Discord, or maybe your team is small enough that you can organize, just in a group chat using Signal or something like that. So take into consideration why you want to use a certain tool and make sure that everybody that uses it has a shared understanding of where things are located. And you should check in throughout the campaign to see if the way that your digital organizing infrastructure is as effective as it can be. That's another reason why it's really important to set this stuff up ahead of the election season. You don't want to be checking and seeing if your Google Drive is organized at the same time that you're trying to fill out endorsement forms and set up your calendars and everything like that. So have that stuff ahead of time, because then when it comes time to do things like Canvas, you've already got all the materials that you need for canvassing in an accessible spot so that people can print them on their own and go from there. So I think that's it for this slide. I'm going to pass it to you, Josh.
Okay, thanks, Haley. Okay, why organize as a collective? There are so many reasons that I could spend a large amount of time going over this, but I'll keep it short. Like ideally, one of the advantages is anybody in the campaign collective helps make decisions by consensus, and in doing so, everybody is presented in the decision-making process to ensure that policy and campaign decisions are informed by members of several communities. Making use of your networks is key. If you're writing housing policy, you want to talk to homeowners and renters in your collective. You want to reach out to them and reach out to any activists and activist groups that you have contacts with and know. And if there are issues that you don't have an understanding about, it's always good to reach out to the people that are on the ground doing the work then. Having a diverse collective allows everybody to filter everything through lived experiences, and different people have different knowledges and different experiences. And we as as leftists have to really keep our fingers to the pulse on the working class, even in parts of it that that we might not have that much. It really helps me as a cishet white man to have a man that's running a campaign, have members of my collective that can call me out if I say something unintentionally really stupid, because privilege is as privilege does, and there's a lot of stuff that, due to my lived experience, I'm not really gonna have a real visceral understanding of, other than the people around me. And even with the best intentions, I can stick my foot in my mouth if I'm anywhere near a foot. It's really important, and it's really important when you're writing policy, to have people from different communities and different sectors of the working class that you're there to represent. Because everybody is going to have a different lived experience, and it's important to incorporate all that in your goals, because it's really easy with the best intentions and with the right heart to say something or put out something that will alienate unintentionally large groups of people. It's important you don't do that, especially I would assume that if you're running a leftist campaign, you give a shit about people. So it's important to you don't want to have your message drowned out by Biden-esque gaffes or Trump-esque bullshit. It's important to get your experience out there, and everybody that's in the collective is going to learn something from being in the collective, and they're going to be able to understand how to run this. And when I set up my collectives in the last campaign and this one, it is my goal that every member of my campaign collective, if they so choose, have the understanding and the know-how and the ability to run a campaign on their own. That way you multiply power, right? Like, it starts out, my unknown self is running for city council, and then in 2 years maybe we have Haley running for mayor and Wayne running for governor. I'm just throwing out examples. So it's important that if we use this as a tool, and it helps us get together on policy, right? And it's to make a good, well-rounded policy. You've got people, when you have people from a whole lot of different groups that have a whole lot of different backgrounds, because the one thing you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. I don't want to create a housing policy that is contradiction to a group that I'm affiliated with, say Wake County Housing Justice Associate Coalition, who I work with. I don't want to come in and tell them what they need to do. What I need to do is I need to listen to them. And I have members in my campaign collective that are also members of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. So I can, when I put out my message, I'm not putting something out in contradiction to that. And a lot of that, especially with recent events, the overturn of Roe versus Wade, like, I've got positions that I think we need to protect bodily autonomy, but before I make any crazy policy decisions, I would like to sit around and talk to people that are on the ground dealing with reproductive health every day, rather than like swoop in and solve the problem, because it's not going to happen. And you need to know that, make sure that your policy aligns with your aligned groups that are on the ground. And as a socialist, I'm a big fan of collectives. I think it's important that we as socialists get together and let live how we act. And Haley, did you have something you wanted to say?
I think I'm just going to be covering more about this in the next couple of slides, so I'm good.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to take. See, you got to call your candidates out. We'll go to the next slide. Being involved as a candidate, being involved with your community and local organizing, amplifying and supporting the work of BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ organizers, and taking action. I am giving that to Haley.
All right, awesome. So the first part of this that I'm going to cover is, a huge part of running an effective campaign is knowing who the communities are that you're seeking to represent and knowing their needs. So for us, we're currently running a citywide campaign, which is a unique challenge because we've got 5 districts in our city, and each of those districts is going to have distinct and very localized issues that residents are trying to tackle, in addition to broader issues that cover the entire city. So a good way to learn what your community's needs are is to go ahead and establish relationships with organizers and activists who are already on the ground. In a large city or town, there's a good chance that there's people in your community that are already talking about housing issues, policing issues, and so on. And many of those activists will have been doing that work for some time now. So they're going to have historical information and special knowledge about the community that you want to represent. So for example, in Raleigh, I frequently talk to housing justice advocates in my city. And these activists have been living in Raleigh for much longer than I have. Some of them are lifelong residents. Some of them have been here for several decades. So they have personally witnessed the change that has come to Raleigh over the last 30 plus years. And many of them have canvassed neighborhoods over time, or they know long-term residents in these areas. And those types of connections are essential if you want to learn about the everyday issues that people in those communities are facing. So seek those organizers out, and you should especially be seeking out BIPOC and LGBT+ activists, because we want to be in solidarity with the people that are experiencing disproportionate marginalization and oppression, right? So seek those organizers out and tell them that you want your policies to be informed by the work that they're doing on the ground and organizing. And let them educate you. Attend their rallies, go to their protests, listen to them speak, share their stuff on social media, have meetings with members of their organization, and talk together. Because the more time that you spend educating yourself on your community's needs, the better equipped you're going to be to write good policy, to canvass, and have talking points ready to go when you're talking to residents. And you're going to be strengthening relationships between these groups in the process. A lot of activism requires collaboration between collectives, organizations, and campaigns. And as leftist organizers, coalition building is a really big part of how we ensure that we're building power across a community. That way, when it comes time for residents to vote, there's going to be groups that stand behind you and go into communities that you might not have reached otherwise. Campaigning is really hard work. And when your collective is entirely volunteer-based and oftentimes made up of full-time workers and students, you have to be really smart about the way that you use your energy. And you're not going to knock on every door in the city by yourself, and you're not going to be able to attend every single event that comes up during the election season by yourself. So going ahead and establishing those relationships now is helpful because there's strength in numbers. And you might foster connections between 2 different activist groups in your city that might not have come together otherwise. And you want to be prepared so that not only do you have a successful campaign where people in these groups go out and are standing behind you when you're canvassing, you want to be a successful candidate so that once you're in office, these relationships are already established and people know that they can come to you to start addressing local issues. So seek out organizers in various types of work, whether that's voter outreach, environmentalism, policing, housing justice, and so on. And like I said, sharing flyers from other groups to your pages is a really great way to make sure that people that are following you are informed on these local issues. And I've personally found that offering support to these groups goes a really long way. So if you see an event that you as a candidate, like an event about a topic that you as a candidate care about, it goes a long way just to message the organizers and say, hey, do you need a table for this event? Can we bring water? Can we bring snacks? Because you're not showing up to these events as a candidate for a photo op, right? You're there because you support their organization and the work that they're doing. So offering that type of material support goes a really long way in building those connections with organizers. Let's go ahead. Can you go to the next slide, Josh? Okay. So that's one way that you can go about connecting with organizers and activists. And we were just talking a little bit about the importance of like those in-person events, because nothing's going to beat the type of connection where you go meet people on the ground and have in-person discussions with them. That's a big part of why canvassing and going door to door and being locally active as much as possible is essential. People are more likely to remember to vote for somebody that they met in person, and you have to be involved in the communities that you want to represent, because residents are going to be best informed on their own needs. So if you want to truly represent them, you're going to have to meet them where they're at. But that doesn't mean that meeting people in person is the only way that you can do outreach, right? Social media is a really good way to build those online communities, and being a social media manager is a really good way for members of your campaign that volunteer remotely to get involved. So as the social media manager for our campaign, I handle our branding, our digital spaces, I write our posts. Recently, I redid our website. And having done that, there's a couple of main things that I have noticed are essential for having a really strong online presence. So for one, knowing what your messaging is for your campaign ahead of time. If you have those platform documents and policies ready to go, then when you're making posts that represent the campaign, you're going to be prepared to answer direct messages, direct people to local resources. You'll be ready to answer questions about your campaign, and you're going to know which local groups and activists you want to interact with in those online spaces and who you want to support. So I oftentimes refer back to our policy documents when I'm drafting statements. I've also found that our followers, depending on the platform, really want to see us respond to local current events. So if you have a news article that talks about housing in your city or talks about workers' wages or anything like that, and people are talking about it frequently, that's a good time to go ahead and respond to that on your social media platform, so that people see that you're a part of that discussion, that you're paying attention to what it is that they're talking about, and then they can get an idea of what your stance is. They also are going to want to see if you have city council meetings that you're going to. That's a really good thing to post about. They want to see the events that you're planning and that you're promoting. That way they know where they can go to meet you in person. And I found that it's really important to treat each of these platforms as their own community. And you can kind of get an idea of which ones you want to put more time and energy into by looking at your analytics. So if you look at the analytics for each one of your platforms, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or what have you, you can see how many people are interacting with your post. You can see what types of content they want to interact with the most. And you want to kind of compare that across those platforms. So I've found that for our campaign, we do the best on Twitter for some reason. Every month I check on our Twitter analytics and I look at the types of tweets that people are responding the most to. And because that's where we're getting the most reach, that's where I end up putting most of my time. Because if I have limited amounts of time and energy, I want to figure out which platform is worth investing the most of that time and energy into. So let me see. I'm just looking at my notes. But yeah, definitely don't hold back in terms of your social media presence, because your campaign is not only looking for voters, right? You're also going to be looking for volunteers that might live in nearby cities and towns. You might be getting financial donors and backers in different states. So any reach that you get online is going to be beneficial to you. I've also found that having consistent branding for the campaign makes putting posts and policy documents and everything together a lot easier. I personally use programs like Illustrator, Lightroom, and Photoshop for most of the stuff that I do for the campaign, but you can use things that are open source too, like GIMP is a really good program for that. And I've just found that you want to have a set of graphics that are resizable. So you can use something that is like lossless, like a PNG file. You want to make vectors, right? So our campaign logo has the acorn with the fist cut out inside of it. I have that saved as a vector on my computer. And so I can blow that logo up as big as I need to. It could go on a billboard, or as small as I need to, so that you can use it in like a palm card or a business card or something like that. So have your branding set out ahead of time. What colors do you want to use? What's your logo look like? What kind of fonts are you using? That way, when it's time for you to make your posts and everything, it's super easy. Make sure that you're using use of templates too. I use Canva personally. They have a ton of templates there that are really good for like putting together calendars and event flyers and social media posts. But it's as simple as looking something up like a Google Slides template and then just putting your logo, your color scheme, and your fonts on it. So, work smart where you can, and you'll save a lot of time. When I find that I'm stuck on like a post idea for social media, I frequently go and I check out the pages of other activist groups in the area. I look at campaigns that I think are successful, and I just look at the types of content that they're posting, the things that their followers seem to like, and I try to draw inspiration from there wherever I can. And I also wanted to make sure that I mentioned Linktree, which has saved me a lot of time during this campaign. Having all of your links in one central place, that way when somebody comes up to a table or you're canvassing and they're saying, well, how do I find you online? You don't have to go and give them the handles for, you know, all 6 or 7 pages that you have. You don't have to do that in addition to giving them the links for your website and your donation site and your mailing list sign up. You can just have it all in one place. And I'm going to make sure to put ours in the chat so that you can see an example of that. You don't have to necessarily use Linktree. There's a couple of different services that offer this type of like area to keep all of your links, but that's the one that I personally use. And yeah, I mean, I think that mostly covers the basics of like what I think about when I'm posting to our social media pages and I'm doing our online outreach. But if you have technical questions about post design or things that are specific to one of these social media platforms or about any of the softwares that I use for our digital campaign infrastructure and social media, just put those in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. So I think that's good on my end.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. Let's see. So the next section, I'm going to throw off to Wayne, running independent or third party, preparing for running outside of the two-party system, partisan versus nonpartisan elections, and the impacts affiliation has on campaigning.
Okay, thank you. When I wrote this, I was reminded of the impact that the two-party system has in politics in the United States. Everyone here will be familiar with that, but I think the average person who is used to seeing Democratic or Republican as a label in elections doesn't really appreciate the extent to which the ability to run outside of those parties is made difficult by the depth to which those parties have penetrated our electoral system. So throughout this, that's going to be a recurring theme. And another recurring theme will be that much of what happens as you make these decisions will depend on election law in your area. So there's several factors that you need to consider, whether you're running for a federal office, a state office, or a county or municipal seat. If you're running in a state and a federal race, those are going to be partisan races. That means the candidate's name appears on the ballot with their party affiliation by it. If you choose to affiliate with one of those parties, you're going to have to compete in their primaries. If you do so and lose, some of those states will bar you from running as an independent. And if you're going to affiliate with a major party, but you don't really share their platform or their views, they most probably will spend some time, effort, and money making sure that you lose the primary. They're not going to just allow you to run in their primary and use their ballot label to get access. The sore loser laws that have proliferated across the U.S. Have been made in response to exactly this: candidates trying to win a party primary, losing, and then refiling as an independent so they can run. If you are lucky enough to live in a state where Socialist or Greens or some other party is qualified that matches your ideas and platforms, you might be able to win their primary. You might, for example, win the Peace and Freedom primary in California. You might win the Working Families Party primary somewhere. But some of these organizations, well, if you affiliate as a known progressive or a socialist inside one of the major parties, they're almost certainly going to come after you. So if there's a third party that you feel like you can fit into, you may very well be able to win their primary and run on their ballot ticket. Next slide, please. So what about running independent as opposed to third party? You're in a partisan race. There's no ballot qualified party worth affiliating with, which usually just means registering as a voter with that party's label. You can consider running as an independent. And so that decision is going to depend on the electoral law that's in your state. Those laws will be unique to your state, and your campaign is going to have to be familiar with them before making a decision to file. States often impose petition requirements upon independent candidates. This is an example of the Democratic and Republican parties' influence reaching down into state electoral law and determining who can and can't compete with them. Some states is virtually impossible. Other states it's extremely easy. But most states will require that you do something, usually collect signatures of registered voters in the geographical area that you're in, or that the office covers, such as in a congressional district. They may want specific numbers: 1% of the electorate, 2%, 5%, 10%. These numbers are made quite often with the intent of imposing a barrier that can't be overcome. They sound small, the numbers sound small, but when you actually go out and try to collect signatures, they suddenly seem huge. Some states will make the difficulty of complying with the law non-trivial. There may be a time limit. You may have 2 months to get the signatures. An example of a really bad state is the state of Georgia, which I think I'll talk about a little bit later on. Illinois is particularly bad. New York is now particularly bad. North Carolina is kind of so-so. So you have to look at your electoral law in your state, and you have to be familiar with it to understand what you have to do. Next slide. Petition campaigns. If you have to run a petition campaign, these can be extremely challenging. You have to decide how you're going to get signatures. Are you going to use volunteers? Are you going to use paid petitioners? Or are you going to use a combination of them? Using volunteers is certainly preferred. People are dedicated to the success of your campaign. They're willing to put in the time and effort to collect signatures, and they're willing to do it for free. If you think you can do this with an all volunteer effort, you have to start planning early. If you have a time limit, you're going to want your team to hit the ground ready to go. You can't be 2 weeks into your time limit and still be training volunteers. You have to have people ready to go on the ground at the beginning of that limit. You want to look at your state laws about petitioning. Georgia, for instance, as I mentioned earlier, petitioners are required to have their petition sheets notarized and sign what amounts to an affidavit that they are personally guaranteeing that each signature is that of a registered voter. By doing so, that petitioner becomes liable for violations of state law. And this is deliberate. It's intended to scare petitioners off. Some states will require that petitioners be state residents. They won't let someone come in from out of state to petition, even if they're a volunteer. Next slide. But if you have volunteers, you have to organize them. You have to identify your petitioners. You have to identify people that are going to lead teams of petitioners, point people or group leaders. You have to set goals. You have to get a certain number of signatures per week to be able to meet your goal. You have to train petitioners to ensure that their adherence to the law. And you also have to train them to engage people. 2 reasons to train people. One is it will, you give them a way to present themselves in the shortest time possible as a representative of your campaign to maximize the number of signatures they get and minimize the amount of time they spend talking to people, because every minute that you spend listening to someone rail about his or her pet issue is a minute that you don't get another signature. Also, because the petitions have requirements, they may have, you have to legibly print enough information there for the state to verify that this is a registered voter. People that sign petitions often are in a hurry and they'll just scribble stuff down. Turns out to be illegible. They enter their signature and just ends up getting rejected. It's no good to you. So you have to train petitioners both in public engagement and in collecting a valid signature, a signature that's worth, that will be counted towards your requirement. Signature validation. Signatures have a rejection rate. It can be a really bad rejection rate, like 40% of your signatures get rejected. It can be a really good rejection rate. 10% of your signatures get rejected. You have to take that number or your expected rejection rate and figure it into the number of signatures that you're planning to collect. And you have to collect that amount or in excess of it and turn it in to have a good chance of actually getting on the ballot. There's going to be printing costs, there's going to be material costs, there's going to be travel expenses. This depends largely on the area you're petitioning in. If you're petitioning in a congressional district, those might be somewhat reduced, but if you're petitioning statewide, depending on the race that you're in, they can be considerable. We recently spent several thousands of dollars in North Carolina on a petitioning campaign. Or rather, when I say we, I mean the North Carolina Green Party, of which I'm also a member. Depending on the campaign finance laws in your state or the FEC laws, if it's a federal race, all those expenses are going to have to be tracked and accounted for. This was addressed by Emily earlier when she talked about treasurers. This is what your treasurer does. Your treasurer has to track all of these expenses and make sure that they are reported to the appropriate authority. And it's not a trivial undertaking. Next slide, please. So what about paid petitioners? Well, in the past, we have had some success hiring petitioners directly and providing them material and paying them some small amount of money per signature, $1.50, $2. And we've had some luck with that. Or you may also just hire a firm that specializes in collecting signatures. The direct campaign hires, you can get students, you can get people looking for temporary work. You can advertise for this at local businesses or colleges or universities with flyers. A flyer as simple as just these little tear off phone numbers that you have at the bottom for them to get in touch with you. You can put ads in local papers that may turn up people that can supplement unpaid volunteers and not replace them. The pros of this are less expense, and the cons are that they may require a lot of supervision. People that are getting paid by the signature can be very gung-ho, but they can also be very inattentive to the requirements of getting a valid signature in favor of just collecting more signatures. You have a bad or indifferent petitioner, they're going to waste your time, they're going to waste your money, and potentially they're going to drag your campaign down by violating laws that govern petitioning. Next page, please. Contractors. If you've got a really big budget, which most people won't, you can consider professional contractors. Depending on what state you're in, you can expect to pay these people at least $5 per signature and as much as $10 per signature. They may bring in petitioning teams, they may hire local people to petition, but these firms are not of uniform quality. The campaign will be dependent upon their professionalism And unless you know these firms or their track records really well, there's considerable risk in hiring these firms. My experience with contractors to date has been uniformly bad. Part of that is because of the state that we're in. There are no ballot access referendums here, and petitioning contractors do not typically come to places like North Carolina that don't have ballot referenda. They make most of their money in states where they can petition for ballot referenda. California is a good example. Probably thousands of people working out there on different petitions to put different items on ballots in upcoming general elections. But states where you don't have referenda, there just isn't much need for contractors to be here. There's not a experienced pool of petitioners for them to pull from, and they just don't produce good results. But that may not be the case in your state. It depends on what's going on there. Next slide, please. So again, campaigns are conducted within the political environment that is on the ground in the area that you're in. Josh and Haley talked about getting endorsements. You will find several organizations on the ground that are probably used to endorsing or promoting candidates based on their political desires. They might be NGOs, they might be such as the Sierra Club, they might be neighborhood associations. They might be an interest group dedicated to housing or policing or so forth. Some of them, like local chambers of commerce, will weigh in on behalf of finance and development. And some or all of these groups, again, because of the depth and reach of the Democratic and Republican parties, will openly affiliate with one or the other major political party. These groups will hold events that introduce candidates to the public. If you're an independent candidate or you're a third party candidate, they may not invite you. They just don't want you there because they are dedicated to the cause of one of the other major political parties. And they'll use excuses to exclude you. They'll make up, you haven't raised enough money, or Josh, I'm sure, could tell you of numerous things that have been said to disinvite him from various events. But it's a deplatforming tactic. So you have to be prepared to deal with these things. Call them out. You have to be hold press conferences in front of their events. Publicize the fact that these groups are excluding you. Don't let them mute you entirely just by virtue of not allowing you to show up. Next slide. It may turn out in your state that it's actually not that hard to get on the ballot as a party. I mean, if you're a socialist and you want to run as a socialist, but there's no socialist party in your state, what does your state law say? You might find that you can get on the ballot pretty easy. In Florida, for example, you could simply write a letter to the Secretary of State declaring that you're forming a political party and naming your officers, and you're on the ballot. But you come to somewhere like Illinois, and you not only have to get petitions to get the party on the ballot, but you also have to separately petition to put your individual candidates on the ballot. And you have a very strict time limit to do it with a very high signature requirement. New York, another example, they recently changed their law to make it much, much harder for a political party to get on the ballot. And then some states will be kind of middle of the road, but you may find that if you're going to have to run a petition campaign as an independent, it may be that you could run the same petition campaign as a political party and get on the ballot, and that will make the decision for you as to whether to run as an independent or a third party. If you're going to do something like that, though, you need to get started early, because to be on a ballot, the election officials have to print them. They have deadlines. There are laws governing qualification of the party and recognition of the party. No, it's not something that can be done at the last minute. It's just like your independent petition campaign. You have to hit the ground running when the period that you can collect signatures in starts. Next slide, please. Nonpartisan races. So a nonpartisan race makes party identification less important, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And the reason for this is that the municipal and county races in the United States are becoming increasingly politicized. The organizations like ACCE, which is the American City Council Exchange, an unfortunate offshoot of the American Legislative Exchange Council. These political operatives, especially conservatives, are reaching down into these county and city races and injecting party politics into them. If you're in a state like North Carolina, the state Democratic parties can be extremely partisan. And if they see challenges from their left, even if it's a nonpartisan race, they will go out of their way to isolate you, make sure that you don't get endorsements, oppose you wherever they can. Whatever control they have, they will use against you. And it will be used to exclude your campaign from debate. And this is where you have to start calling these people out. These conditions may not prevail in your state. Not every state perhaps has local major party operatives that are as partisan as they are in, say, North Carolina or New York or Illinois. But the possibility is there. And so you may have to find that you have to work harder to get press coverage and endorsements. You may have to work as hard as a nonpartisan race as you would in a partisan race. For example, some years ago, I worked on a campaign in a municipality in North Carolina where we ran a soil and water candidate in a nonpartisan race, and the entire county Democratic apparatus turned out to oppose her. It was really quite amazing. Next slide, please. So what about other candidates that are in the race? What are you going to do with them? You may find that there are candidates that share some of all of your campaign's public policy goals. In Raleigh and Josh's current race, there are several candidates down here that are roughly politically compatible with what they're trying, with many of the policy positions that we're trying to achieve. Some of these candidates are nonpartisan enough to consider joint campaign events around shared policies or offer mutual support. How can you demonstrate mutual support? Depending on how you choose to organize with them, it may be the formation of a slate that's united around an issue or issues. You could mutually distribute campaign literature while you're canvassing, or you can mutually support these people when you go to the polls. You're going to want to have poll workers. When the actual election comes around, I don't know if this was mentioned earlier, but a lot of your volunteers are going to be needed to work polls at election time and hand out literature. This is important because quite often when people walk in to vote, they only have a vague idea of what or who they're voting for, or maybe they're voting for one candidate in a race that has multiple seats on it, and they don't have a great familiarity with the other seats. So oftentimes just handing them a piece of paper when they walk in the door or something to read before they fill out the ballot will influence their decision about who to vote for. Pulling campaign resources, you can do voter research, you can invite each other to forums that you hold, you can share event spaces. Next slide, please. Looks like we got to the end. So I'll turn this back over to Josh.
Okay, thanks. Haley, do you want to go over the where to find us stuff?
Sure. Yeah, this is, I put some of these links in the chat as well, but this is just the links to our website, our link tree. And our link tree has, like I said, links to everything else that we have. So that's like the one central place where you can find everything. And we've got our email and our campaign phone number here as well. If you reach out to our campaign with any follow-up questions, or if you DM us on social media, it's going to go directly to either myself, to Josh, or if somebody else has the campaign phone at the time or is on one of our social media pages, they'll respond to you as well. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-up questions, or if you just want to talk to us about policy and stuff that's happening in Raleigh.
Awesome. Okay. Let me open the chat. Yeah, not that big. And see if anything's on Q&A. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. If any, I want to throw this out there to the attendees. Our campaign is in the process of making a TAC ad against the campaign. I have a very rough cut of it. If anybody wants to look at it, I can probably share that as good as Zoom will let me. But has anybody noticed any questions? I didn't really have access to the chat since I was running the slideshow that we want to answer.
There was one that we could expand on. Somebody asked, what issues and concerns did working people have? Has any research been done in that focus? If we consider ourselves a working class oriented party in the Debsian socialist outlook, these are guiding concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know at least in the purpose of our campaign, we've worked on a lot of on the ground with a lot of organizations. I mean, including, you know, our local in the SP, but you know, we try to hit the grounds in Raleigh. One of the biggest, there are two pretty, well, there's several big, we're working on 5, but the top two really are housing and the rapid gentrification of our city and the lack of affordable places for workers to work. That is probably the number one issue. Unfortunately, North Carolina is a right to work state, which means right to work for less. So you can have unions, they're harder to organize. And it's also an at-will state. So you can pretty much be fired because your boss wants to fire you for no reason. So, you know, we've been doing our best to get out. I mean, most of us work or have worked. And we've reached out to, you know, a lot of groups on the ground and been involved in a lot of activism in the area. You know, I would say the number one concern in Raleigh is just housing affordability. Your average 1-bedroom apartment is over $1,000 a month, and the minimum wage in North Carolina is still a hearty $7.25 an hour, which isn't good. There's been a lot of pushback from employers saying nobody wants to work anymore, but we're only going to pay people $11 an hour. You can't afford to live in the city, and if you're going to have to move an hour and a half outside the city because your job pays you shitty and you can't afford to live in the city, then you're going to get a job where you have to move to, because even if they pay crappier, at least it's affordable to live. You can afford a place to live there. So you know, we've reached out to you know, a lot of union contracts to I've got a lot of personal contact with UE 150, which is the government workers union, and organizations like Black Workers for Justice and you know, UE 150 and groups like that. And the other biggest thing in Raleigh has to do with over policing, and the fact that apparently Raleigh can't go more than 6 months without shooting or killing and otherwise killing an unarmed person of color. Which is, I mean, we have a pretty left platform on that. Like, we want to dismantle the current system of policing and recreate something that's actually about protecting people, as opposed to protecting, the bourgeois and property. So in that, we've got a lot of contacts with a group called Refund Raleigh that are really big on, the whole defunding the police and moving some of the money from the police budget, which takes up almost half, if not more than half of the city budget, and using it for social programs to lift people up to where statistically, the only thing that has ever been shown to lower crime is making sure that people don't live in poverty. So, I mean, we try to work in conjunction with them and get their stuff, even though apparently after the George Floyd protests, defund the police was pretty popular, even among the progressive-ish Democrats, but they've changed their tune. And when a Democrat says defund the police, it means give them more money, which is really not how we roll here. But working conditions, worker safety are always really important. And the fact that North Carolina has been recently named #1 for business, and it's also recently been declared number 50 and for workers. So there is on the city council, there's only so much that you can do, but you can push a message. And as the capital city, we're hoping to have some kind of influence over the state government, even if it's just to shame them. But I hope that comes close to answering. Bill, I appreciate the question. Let's see. I don't know where the chat box is. Anybody else have any questions, comrades? I can unmute anybody. And if anybody wants to hang around and see this attack, the really rough cut of the attack ad we're writing against ourselves, I can do it. But, it's got to be of interest to people. I don't want to bore people with it. Let's see. Well, I don't see any more. I don't see any more questions. Nobody seems opposed. Thanks, friend. I don't see anybody opposed to me playing this video. So if I don't have any questions, I'm going to subject you to the video. I know it's past the 4 o'clock time, but it's only about a couple of minutes. But and I also want to thank everybody that was able to show up to the National Organizing Convention. It's the second one we've done online. Obviously it's a little harder to get everybody out to NOCs, especially since COVID is still very much a thing. But we'll, I mean, it's always good to be in shared space with you, comrades, and I think that we are stronger together. Now I'll see if I can dig out this this attack ad video. It'll take me just a second to look it up. If that's okay, if anybody on the campaign collective can absolutely tell me, Josh, stop, you're being stupid, because that's what collective's about. And again, I think that we're stronger together. If you organize your campaign the way that you try to organize society, I think it's very, very, very good. Take me just a second to pull out this this campaign video. And then there's things you can do. You can organize concerts. Fortunately, we have an organizer in our collective who is awesome. And by that, I mean Haley. So there's lots of stuff that you can do. And I'm still looking, I promise I'm looking through the list to do it. Okay. Okay, yeah, it's not very long. Let me go full screen here and then go to Zoom and share my screen. Okay, advanced sharing options. And we need to make sure we can hear this. Can y'all hear that? Okay. Here we go. Wait, let me close this stuff out.
Born in Raleigh to make a real living wage and have affordable housing for all. Joshua Bradley. Guess who wants to lift the people of Raleigh out of poverty and do away with over-policing? Joshua Bradley. Guess who wants equal access to health care for everyone in Raleigh? Josh Bradley. Guess who supports unions and the creation of new unions to help protect the working people of Raleigh? Joshua Bradley.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not finished. We're gonna do that, and I'm gonna stop recording if I can figure out